My concern is that if you start blanketly saying music is a loss leader, you fuck up your game before you even start.
First, I would like to say that I don't believe there's no money in music. My stance comes from the fact that it is slower to make a full-time living if the music is your highest source of revenue.
What's going down? It's the At Odds podcast. We're already at odds today. There was an argument off camera. So whatever you see from now on, this amicable dynamic that we all have, it's all fake. How are you guys feeling today?
Good. It's always amicable.
Facts.
Still a little unsettled from the earthquake on Monday. I was doing our 2 Lost office hours. During the session, there was an earthquake. And here at the 2 Lost office, we're 9 floors up in a brick building. So and earthquakes are something that you never get used to. I'm from the West Coast. I felt a lot of earthquakes. But yeah, something that you never get used to. So even now I'm thinking like, is shit going to start shaking? Cause yeah, earthquakes are very unsettling. Like, and I don't even know what the plan is. Like if you 9 floors up, you probably just praying at that point. Like there's cause the elevator shuts. I mean, you don't want to get an elevator, but things shut down immediately. But I had Rob Markman on. We were having a good conversation. And he was actually out here. He's out here on the West Coast, too, this week. So he got a chance to feel, even though he's based in NY, he got a chance. He got a welcome to the West Coast earthquake. But things are going well. We're probably another week away from announcing our live event. By the way, this episode is sponsored by 2 Lost. Use the promo code @odds to get 3 months free music distribution. Let's get that out of the way so we can get to it. But Erinn, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, Payne, we're always amicable. I think
I'm always sarcastic for the record.
Well, I just want to let people know that because I feel like I think that people think, and I'm just going to say this just for myself. I don't think Dame's a difficult personality at all. I don't actually think I'm a difficult personality, but I've been told that because I stick to my guns or like disagree with like maybe the mainstream on a lot of things, i.e. people's personal opinions a lot of times because they're grounded in the mainstream. Some people say that would be difficult. I think that there's so much value in disagreeing with people. One, because it can correct you, as you'll see when we talk about something, because Dame is constantly correcting me, but not in a way that I feel like, oh, he's like slapping me. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, why would you not want to get wisdom from somebody who knows more than you? But I also think that if you disagree with something and you're able to formulate a genuine opinion around it after receiving wisdom, whether you move towards the wisdom or stay where you're at, I think there's a benefit there. And I think a lot of people don't pragmatically think about disagreement. They either think you have to have the same or very similar thought processes, or it's not amicable. And I think that that's something that I would hope that this podcast has displayed, that like differences don't, like, we don't all have to end up in the same place. And that's what makes us brilliant and beautiful. And it's what makes the world up. And I think that if you are somebody who has a strong personality or is considered difficult, if people are trying to correct you and you don't listen, that's typically where they're saying you're difficult. If you still disagree and you're respectful about it, I think that there's a lot of value in people who think that way. As the example is, we just were talking about Noah Lyles. Personally, shout out to Noah Lyles for being one of the fastest men in the world. But Dame reminded me that he was the person who came at the NBA and said, how are they world champions? They're only playing, essentially he just said, because they only play against America, then they can't claim world champions when they play the NBA finals and you win. But it's like America is the power, the dynasty when we go to the Olympics. Now, granted, the Olympics, folks really showed up this year. But if you even think about the other teams, the best of the best are amassed by people who play in the U.S. American NBA. So it was a dumb statement. In our youth, or exuberance, I think a lot of times humans can launch off things out of ego. The issue is only when you try to double down on an opinion that doesn't make sense. And if it does still make sense to you, as Dame just said, sometimes it's okay to be quiet. So there are things in this world, there are a lot of things in this world that I have opinions about that people would be flabbergasted by, like absolutely blown away. They would one, think I was foolish. Two, they would be maybe concerned about my mental health. And then additionally would probably question a lot of where I'm deriving my understanding from, because I know how people would perceive some of my opinions on things that people would assume that I would just be going along with what popular thought is. I just keep my mouth shut. So word to the wise, zip it up. That's something that I've had to learn my whole life. Even me pivoting out of traditional music industry and what I've been doing lately was because I didn't keep my mouth closed. And it's not because what I said was wrong. It's because what I was saying was wrong for the people who were hearing it. They didn't know how to take it, and I had to live with the consequences of that. So shout out to Noah Lyles for reminding me to always be thoughtful in what I say, and to Dame as well.
Shout out to Noah Lyles for being a top 5 bag fumbler of the year. I don't know who the other 4 are, but he definitely loses a lot of money to get his corny statements off.
The thing is, even though he doubled down and was dumb, I will say he was foolish. He kind of buys himself out of the foolishness because he keeps performing at such a high level, which I think is kind of the issue with artists as well. If we want to segue into the podcast, I think that a lot of times, and we talked about a clip of this, which is not what I was planning on talking about, but I'm just going to throw it out there. There was a manager who was talking. Whose manager was he? It's an artist that I don't.
Oh, you're talking about Joyner Lucas.
Joyner Lucas manager. Okay, shout out to his manager is brilliant. But Joyner Lucas's manager said something that was really interesting. He said that some artist finesse is talent, which I completely agree with. They know that they're talented. They take that talent. They finesse other people with that talent. They're like, I'm talented. So that it gets people to invest their time, money, energy, whatever. But the thing is, there's nothing there after that. It's just the talent. Some people are probably listening to this right now confused as to why I'm like, yeah, of course they're talented. If you only have talent, if you only have one offering in any business, you are essentially worthless, in my opinion. Because even if you have an incredibly valuable product, if it is not streamlined, if it is not highlighted, if it's not priced in the market right, delivered properly, then it's essentially of no value. So if you're able to finesse and convince people to market your product, to put you into the mainstream, to put you out there in a way that makes you profitable, it is a finesse. And I believe that that's a very frustrating issue. I don't believe that this is Noah Lyles. He's not solely talented. There's obviously, if he was just talented and didn't have the work ethic, he'd be underdeveloped and therefore wouldn't have won and wouldn't be one of the fastest men in the world. But I'm just sticking along that line to say that I think that it's a thought that we need to talk about is talent versus the other things that are needed to make up a business. And I've dealt with a lot of artists who have swam along enough because they can convince enough great people that they're talented to keep them afloat, but they never really go far because they're not willing to do what it takes to actually ascend.
Yeah. Well, let's Payne, can you bring up the tweet from yesterday so we could jump into these topics? Noah needs a publicist that he listens to at the end of the day. Like Noah, if fumbling the bag is worth getting your thoughts on, because some people are just like, look, I am who I am. I want to speak how I speak. I just want people to understand the implications of their actions. And if you still decide to do what you do in a way where you understand what the ramifications are going to be, then, more power to you. But a lot of people are making impulsive decisions, not understanding the consequences, which is wild because we've been on the internet so long. We've seen how we can pretty much predict how people are going to react to certain things at this point because we've seen so many people do it, just jump out the window and be impulsive. So,
you got to think if you're the most special person in your circle, and then you start getting into wider circles and you're the most special person, you lose contact with reality.
Yeah, that's when that team comes in, and you got to have those people around you that keep you grounded. So this is what I read. So this is directly on Twitter, but this is essentially what I screenshot and posted to Instagram yesterday. It was Russ's initial comment. It said, "Gaslight of the century is the music business making people think the real money is in touring. No, it's in owning music. Ask the labels who gross billions yearly who have never done a show in their life." And then I posted my response as well. I don't know if you have that, Payne.
Yeah, it's there.
Me sarcastically said, "Hey, wait, but I thought there was no money in music, and that music is just marketing these days. Not sure how many people make it. Not sure how many people it will take to combat this narrative. Thanks for helping, Russ." And there was a decent amount of chatter. Brandman chimed in. I'll let Erinn start with her response, but I hopefully have a way to explain this that even the three of us will be like, okay, I get it. But Erinn, your response to the chatter, feel free. I'll let you take the stage first.
First, I would like to say that I don't believe there's no money in music. My stance comes from the fact that it is slower to make a full-time living if the music is your highest source of revenue. It takes longer to get there. And I think that post-pandemic, well, really during the pandemic, the industry changed over, and I think it just did another flip. So my thought process is coming from, yes, I believe there's 100% money in music, and especially in ownership. I want artists to own their music, or at least participate in a larger portion of the ownership and controlling their master. I just believe that when you're starting from zero, if you look at your music as a loss leader or a main contributing factor to your marketing, then you can build a robust and diverse business around the music business and not solely based on your music accruing most of the income. Just because I think in the streaming age, it takes so much more to make money off of your music. Even with things like you're going to have to amass a huge following. Whereas even when I started the music industry, if you got a track on radio, there might have not been a lot of people who knew you or even showed up to your concert, but you were still making bread. Do you know what I'm saying? Whether you were independent or on a label, it was like in a time where you could hire an independent radio plugger. You know what I'm saying? So that's my thought there. I believe that there are a ton of business models. I believe that music being your main source of revenue is a great business model once you get there. I just think that there are plenty of artists who could be making money and even a full-time living delivering other offerings with their business and just looking at music as their marketing.
Gotcha. So I know that a lot of times with these conversations, like they turn into conversations where they didn't start, right? Because I would agree that any business, well, not any business, but artists especially should have diversified revenue streams. And also didn't say that like music should be your top revenue stream. What I want artists to understand is like artists aren't making a product, they're creating an asset, right? That's different. We're not selling eggs here. You're creating something that for most artists isn't worth anything because it's not being streamed. I mean, there's so many songs being released, 100,000 songs a day, right? But again, put it in your mind that you're creating an asset, you're not creating a product. An asset that Payne reminds us all the time that there's two different copyrights to that you can exploit and make money from, right? My concern is that if you start blanketly saying music is a loss leader or music is just marketing, you fuck up your game before you even start. And you'll start positioning yourself because that's in your mind, like, oh, music is just marketing. And Payne, maybe you kind of putting you on the spot here, but if in your mind music is just marketing or music is a loss leader, what are some of the mistakes that a lot of artists are going to make very early in their career even if they get popping later on, that they're going to have to come back and course correct.
How do we count all of them?
I'll give you what you will probably do is sometimes give away too much of your asset because you don't care. Your music is just marketing. Your music is a loss leader. So you might give a bigger percentage of your early catalog away because you now in your mind are thinking music is a loss leader or just marketing. The other things you might not fully invest in your music to make it the best quality possible. And you'll just start throwing stuff out but again, when you look at I want artists to understand the whole game. I want to understand all the pieces and how you play it. When you play Monopoly, you have the option to start out with 6 or 7 pieces. You could be the thimble, the boat, the car, or whatever. If you go into Monopoly thinking that music is a loss leader because it's not for a lot of artists and it's not just marketing for a lot of artists, if you go into Monopoly thinking that, you don't even see that you could play with the boat. You only are going to play with the thimble because you're going, or when you start playing, you don't even see that. You're probably going to think that you have to buy Boardwalk and Park Place. You're not seeing the entire board. Now, if you understand the entire board, which I want artists to do, and you're like, okay, I choose to use music as marketing, then you're making that choice to be, to buy. I don't know what those first pieces are, but now was that Vermont or whatever. You're now making the conscious choice to set your business up that way. But when we start saying these things just blanketly, artists are now focused in and they don't see the option to get Vermont. They don't see the option to start Monopoly. I know you start out with a decent amount of money, but it's the same thing with there was somebody else. I'm not going to say her name, but I always disagree with her. She says, you got to have a budget, right? You got to have a budget. It's the same impact on artists. If you tell artists that that you have to have a budget, they probably won't even start playing the game. But if you play Monopoly, you know that as soon as you start running the race, you get $200 every time you pass go. And you're going to figure things out. So coming back to how an artist will move, you're going to start figuring things out just on your phone, even if you don't have a budget. You're not just going to throw your hands up and be like, fuck it, I don't have a budget. So long story short, I know that was long-winded, but I just want artists to understand the entire board. Music can be extremely valuable. A lot of people will piggyback these narratives because most music is worthless because there's a lot of music being put out that never gets streamed. But there is a good portion of artists that get a lot of traction. The music becomes extremely valuable. Here at Two Lost, we're doing deals left over right. And we wouldn't even have a healthy company if we couldn't do deals that bank on music generating a lot of money. So that's how Two Lost got to this point. I mean, yeah, we have a subscription service that people pay $3 a month, but the bulk of our business is working directly with artists that generate a lot of money from their catalog and coming back and getting advance. And if we gave away money where the music doesn't recoup that, then we wouldn't have a business. So
I have 2 issues here. So one, we're separating touring from music, which to an extent I understand because touring is more of an experience, not necessarily 100% music, but you can't tour if your music isn't strong and commercially viable. So I acknowledge that there are a lot of musicians in this kind of like 100K to 500,000 monthly listeners range who are making some money off of streaming. Obviously, it's not the bulk of their money, but when you get to that point now, your show fees, if you can perform well and you've done the right kinds of community building, you're getting good money off of your show guarantees. That's not necessarily you thugging it out in a tour in some broken down vehicle, living that life where you might be losing money certain nights and making up for that money the following night. I'm talking about people who might get 2,500. I've known many artists like this. They might get 2,500 guarantees for shows. They play 20 of those a year. That's a fair amount of money. And then they supplement it with everything else. But when you look at what's grossing or what's netting them the most profit, it's probably that, and then maybe the actual royalties generated off of the catalog are second or third, which I don't think there's anything wrong with. It's just that that's where they are in their careers. Some artists stay there, some don't. The problem is with that revenue model, the second you stop touring, you go broke.
Yeah. The reason that I started the Independent Living podcast was to explore these different models and to uncover the fact that every artist has a different revenue model. I talked with Guap Dad. His number one revenue source was brand deals, right? I talked with Nick D. His number one for sure is streaming. It's streaming for more artists than people think, right? Coda the Friend, it's streaming. He can tour more, but he doesn't want to because he has a family and doesn't want to be on the road like that. Streaming has allowed that to be possible, right? These catalog, there's my guy, Ollie Joseph, I don't think has the fan base to tour yet. Building a touring audience is very difficult. And I think, a lot of the casuals just think like, oh, just tour. No, it's not just tour. A lot of people are losing money on these tours. It's very difficult to tour because people don't understand, and Erinn knows all about this, people don't understand how to route them. They don't understand how to budget them. They don't understand how to promote them. Like, and who wants to, and a lot of artists will be like, oh, fuck, I don't want to tour like, Hobson didn't want to tour like that. So that wasn't something that we could bank on. It wasn't like a Strange Music operation where they were on the road like 200 and something days out the year. If you have artists that are built for that and you have the music and the community that can support that, then cool, that's an option for you. But my guy, Ollie Joseph, just drops consistent music. I don't know what his touring capabilities are right now. His socials aren't that strong, but his streams are up. He's 700,000 monthly listeners. He's making a lot of money every month, and his catalog is growing in value. So you never know. And I just don't want to compare. Like, one of the things I said earlier, I know a lot of it was kind of disjointed, but like, just look at your music as an asset and not a product. You're selling access. The product is access to your asset. The asset can be extremely valuable. And sometimes, a lot of it is you having to put into that work, but sometimes your asset becomes valuable for things unbeknownst to you. It could be some user generated content or some contest that you weren't even a part of, right? And there's so many ways to exploit those or to monetize those assets. And I know we talked, it was more kind of a streaming conversation, and that's fine. But just a reminder, there's a lot more ways to monetize your music than just streaming, whether you are, still selling CDs, whether you're getting sync placements, the mechanical royalties, stuff on the publishing side. So, yeah.
Well, what's so crazy? Remember when Russ first started talking about the value of owning your catalog? And then was showing all the millions of dollars he was making off of the catalog that he created before he signed his label deal. And everyone was like, own your catalog, own your catalog. And now they've just moved on to the next platitude, which is apparently that there's no money in music. I think that one has always been a little more pervasive. But so this is my second problem with the conversation. Russ is Russ. Again, like when Russ says something, it's because he's living it. And then, and I get this the same way with anytime I put out a producer video. Everyone wants to chime in with their wisdom, but wisdom comes from experience. So basically what I'm trying to say is people don't know what the fuck they're talking about, but they want to be a part of the conversation. And so this is what I mean. When this conversation happens, Russ isn't necessarily saying this to his fans, but what I do love about his fan base is that a lot of them start to listen and become involved in the kind of music business. And I don't put this on the fans. I put this on the artists that try to become active participants in this conversation. Like, yeah, I'm at the table with Russ. We're on the same page. No, you're not on the same page, man. So here's someone saying that he's replying directly to Russ. There were a lot of dumbass replies to Russ, and thankfully he doesn't see the majority of them. But this person's asserting that the labels gross billions, but are actually operating at a net loss, which, I don't know what century people think we're living in, but one, that's not true. And two, you can actually look up their financial reports. I don't understand what half this shit means. Dame does.
That's asking way too much pain. I mean, even if you didn't like want to go the extra step, and all this stuff is publicly available because they are a public company, like you just pointed out. But people aren't going to do that. As soon as they write something on Twitter, it's fact. It's like people just be pulling shit out of their ass. Probably because they see the former president just pulling shit out of his ass and it's working for him too. So
it works for a lot of people.
We're in the era of just pull shit out of your ass and, defend it like it's your baby. Like
that's the wild part for me. The people defend, like if you're just pulling shit out of your ass, you want to cause chaos, and then you kind of do the Australian breakdance creep out of the room. That's one thing, but these are people who are establishing themselves atop this hill of lies so they can die on that hill.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is they never die on the hill. They're still on that goddamn hill talking.
Or they'll move the goalpost.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, you can't argue with people like that. You just can't. But then you realize that they have strength in numbers. So if I'm having a conversation with a producer and they're like, if you release your music for free, you don't own it anymore. Dumbest shit ever. That's the basics of copyright law. You could easily debunk this by just visiting copyright.gov and reading their fact. All right, you read the FAQ. It's way too much to ask for people to even go that route, because to go that route would mean to second guess whatever point they want to believe. They're just looking for confirmation bias. And so when 10 other people in the comments are like, yeah, Payne's an idiot. He doesn't even work in the music business. Yeah, what does he know about copyright? He's not even making money off music. You start to realize how fucked up the world is because of the people, because people, for the most part, don't want anything but an echo chamber. They don't want to learn. They want excuses. They want people who agree with them. Yeah. They want to cause chaos. They want to argue. They want to appear right. They don't care about being right, because nowadays the appearance of being right to enough people is as powerful, if not more powerful, than actually having facts on your side. Yeah. So it's a really wild situation. And ultimately, the only people who lose are the people who think they're winning the argument, which is also ironic.
The number one tactic is to, like, you're talking about a particular topic, and then they bring up another point that you didn't even make, so they can be right about that. So we can be arguing about basketball. I could clearly be winning the argument, and then you tell me that 2 + 2 is 4. I was like, no shit, we weren't talking about that. Like, you just want to feel right in some way, shape, or form, and you don't want to admit that your opinion is being challenged, and you might be thinking about it differently. And
if you still disagree, it's okay to be like, I hear what you're saying, but I still disagree.
And it's like, cool, go on your little stupid ass way. But you'll say that shit to Russ. You're a fucking Russ fan. You're following the man. Everyone acknowledges that he's one of the most successful independent DIY, whatever we're calling him, artists of the last decade. And you're going to go up there and argue with him. You can argue with me all day, because I'm not, famous, but if you're arguing with me, you know who the fuck I am, because you're on my content. You know what I do.
Like, who are you again? It's like, bro, just leave. When people do that to me, I'm like, just leave. It's cool. Like, you just asserted how insecure you were because you just tried to ask me about myself on my page. Big dog, go ahead, back off.
And then you check, and they're following you.
Yeah. I would be curious to know, because obviously Russ he makes a lot of money touring, but I'm sure his catalog is extremely valuable. I would like to know, like, how many shows he would have to do to get as much money as if he sold his catalog.
Oh my God, a lot.
I'm just guessing at this point, but I'm sure his catalog is definitely worth in the high tens of millions.
I think hundreds of millions, just because he's going to keep himself relevant. Like, I don't know if he's going to keep making music, which I assume he will, because at least right now he seems like he's into it. But I feel like he's the type of person, not just artist, who is going to be teaching about business for the next 2 decades at least, he's going to keep himself relevant with wherever social media goes, wherever the future of the internet, all that, he's going to be relevant. So his catalog is going to be like a grail. I feel like if he were to ever sell it, it would definitely be $1 billion. Like, I feel like he's the type of person who wouldn't sell it for under $1 billion.
So I shouldn't do this, but based on what I would say is a conservative estimate, if we're going off the $0.0035 per stream, we're looking at Russ. He has 14 million monthly listeners. So let's say each monthly listener listens to 3 of his songs.
But I would even argue like it goes back to like a stream from one artist is not the same value of a stream as another artist, right?
No, you're right. That's why I'm saying I shouldn't do this. But this is an incredibly conservative estimate. So I estimate on Spotify alone, he's generating about $2 million off streams. And that's not to say that all the ownership is in his favor. But even if a third of it is, we're talking about the overall worth of a catalog. Right. So if off of one platform you're generating millions a year and you're unsigned, that's a lot of potential there. But
I think there's a point here that I want artists to understand, because if the Hawk Tuah girl comes out with a song and it goes viral, like say she gets 1 million views, right?
Why hasn't she done that?
Like say it gets 1 million streams, like, and then you have somebody like my guy Ollie Joseph, who's building a community and putting out quality songs consistently, and one of his songs hits 1 million. My bet is that his song is going to be way more valuable. I mean, unless the Hawk Tuah thing becomes like something that happens forever, like these flash in the pan moments, these quick moments. Like if your song just does 1 million and then the decay is a steep decline, your catalog's not worth anything. But if you build a community and then you start releasing quality songs consistently, you're going to make money for a very long time, like passive income for a very long time. So again, that's why I just want to make sure that I agree with Erinn. Like you should have a diversified business. I'm not saying, because some people came at me and was like, oh, you gotta work on your other revenue stream. No shit. Like if you've been following me for any amount of time, you understand that I agree with that wholeheartedly. Nobody's saying put all your eggs in the music basket. Like every artist is different. Like I've been saying 1 million times. But I just know what the effect is, that once we start making blatant statements about things, people position themselves different or start making excuses. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to prevent. Right.
And that's why I feel like I'm not going to back off from my stance, because it's like the people who are going to make excuses are going to find a reason to make excuses anyways. To even be at the level to understand what we're saying, that music is a lost leader, and to use it as marketing, to truly understand that means that you have to think as an entrepreneur, and you have to research what we're talking about and then correlate that to the music industry. Because this isn't just I can't just walk up to a regular person and say that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I can't walk up even to the average artist, even to artists making money right now. If I were to say, hey, yeah, utilize music as a loss leader, it could be your marketing, they're going to be like, what do you mean? I do love how you said, view your music as, what did you say, a product, or not as a product, but as an asset. I completely agree with that. And I think that is very worth stating, because when I'm saying this, I don't necessarily positionally believe that you should utilize or look at your music as a product, because then that undervalues your music. So I agree with that. And I think that with me using this language, it could become very X's and O's business. And so some people are like, oh, well, you don't value the music. That's not true. If you know anything about me, I'm listening to unsigned artists probably more than any executive that I know. I'm listening to I love I love art for the sake of art. But if we're sitting here talking about making money in the music industry, I'm now going to adopt a mentality that I've seen work for myself, but a bunch of case studies that I've seen work for others. So even with you saying Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing on the diversification. I know you weren't, but I think for me, sometimes when I'm talking to artists, I'm like, there's a lot more hope a lot sooner if you could look at it as marketing instead of treating it so precious that you're holding everything right next to you and you're limiting yourself from the opportunity to exploit your music as more than just great art. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's where my stance comes from. But I think I'm still in the same place, but I understand. I think that if you even positionally change your position and you're like, well, then I'm just going to waste my I think a young artist is never going to understand this concept. I think if they do understand the concept, they need to be talking to people about what their business model should be and if this is the one to adapt. It's just one for me that I operate on. I used to. I don't really market music or any of that anymore. It's just one that I have seen to work really well, even for creators that make a lot of money now. But I'm not disagreeing with the fact that music is making money. I do believe that music is making a shit ton of money or we wouldn't be here at all, literally, because like you said, too lost.
The labels want this narrative because the more that we say this, the more independent artists kind of take their foot off the gas.
And they're like, oh, I just got to sign to the label.
And it's less competition for these labels' catalogs. Right? What you're talking about is kind of overweighting on the other side. Like, again, just going back to I want artists to know all the pieces that they can play with it and how they can exist. I mean, how many pieces they can pick to choose from and the different strategies they can use as they are navigating their career. So they pick the best one that fits theirs. I know, and I don't want to say his name, I know successful artists that, in my opinion, are making a mistake because they're still treating their music as kind of just like and it's working for them, but they could be giving away too much. You could have the best of both worlds. Like, you don't always have to choose. You don't always have to choose between like, oh, I'm just going to throw my music out there so I can, tour and sell merch. You can do both. You can have a healthy catalog. I mean, Russ is, again, a great example of this. You can have a very healthy, valuable catalog, and you can tour, and you can get sync placements, and you can sell merch. You can do it all if you position yourself to do so, if you brand yourself to do so, if you have the team and the infrastructure to do so. So you don't have to pick and choose. And I think some artists, they got to a point where they probably their catalog could be so much more valuable if they just pulled a few different levers and they can have it all. But, again, it goes back to like, some artists are doing so well that they don't realize how much better they can be doing.
I do think it's worth noting, too, that, like you said, I think you can start a business model a certain way and then you can migrate, you can do hybrids. But I personally believe the way that Russ started was using music as a loss leader. You know what I'm saying? Him dropping weekly and not treating his music as like, it's got to have this elaborate rollout. And he was dropping on SoundCloud, so he wasn't making any money off of it. Do you know what I'm saying? Sure. So I think that he understood the value of the attention economy and utilizing the shock value of dropping music consistently and dropping a visual consistently. But I also believe that he was at a special place in the internet, which is, again, where my thought process comes from. I think that we're at another special place in the internet where it's like, to attain the fan base that you need, it's going to, I don't even want to call it fan base. A community willing to spend the type of money on you to sustain you requires them to notice you more. And if it's like a long time, like you were saying last week, Dame, like a lot of these artists who make really great music aren't consistent enough. So they're not they drop an incredible album and then it takes them 2 years to drop again. And it's like, beloved, you're not Kendrick Lamar. Like, you can't afford to, which is another reason why I kind of like double down on the lost leader thing. It's like, it doesn't matter how good this sounds. It needs to be good enough for now. We can go back and remix it. We can go back and tell the story behind it. And I'm not saying abandon the music. I'm saying don't tie your entire legacy to the thought that I don't want this to come out unless it feels perfect right now, or it's damaging to my reputation. And I think that's kind of just like the stance that I come from.
But and it was that was prior to streaming, and then we did the same thing. There were a lot of mixtapes that we put out for free just to gain an audience. But now with streaming, that music made, even the free stuff that we eventually put on streaming, has made more money than it cost to make. So I would kind of change my position if we were living in that time. But streaming, as much of a bashing it has taken in recent months, recent year, it's changed that quite a bit. It's changed the conversation. But I would also be curious, if I was able to talk to Russ at this point, of like how he would move with his music differently, knowing what he knows now, right? Would he have spent a little bit more time to mix it? Would he have, I don't know how maybe he didn't register his songs, in the early days, because again, if you're just throwing out music like that and all you care about is getting an audience, you probably are skipping some steps that you're going to have to go.
I don't know.
Up.
He was pretty on top of it back then.
He might have been. He
used to talk about it too. He would get all his stuff registered with the PROs and everything.
And I hope so. But I know that a lot of artists in because they so desire that attention, they want to get the fam so fast, they're gonna skip steps and be like, oh man, I was supposed to register that with BMI. What's BMI? I thought BMI was my distributor. Like, they're gonna be, you're probably gonna lose a lot of money that way.
Oh, for sure. I was talking to an artist that we both know very recently, and had asked her if she had registered her live performances, because she was like touring and with her PRO, and she was like, oh, I think I remember learning about that in music biz school. And I'm like, well, you have 18 months. You better go look at all the places you perform, because that's money right there. So I do agree that people skip steps either out of ignorance or out of speed.